Hello viewers, well welcome to part 3 of my Sebastien Loeb Rally Evo previews. Part 1, you saw the presentation that we saw, showing the cars, the tracks, the visuals, the audio, everything else. Part 2 was an interview with Erwin Zonka, the developer, where I just wanted to get some questions, find out issues with converting to consoles, with the graphics and why they've chosen 30 frames, and with the investment and continuing improvement in audio as well. Part 3, normally I'd cut together a very detailed visual video, and there will be some videos in this, but I thought just first I'd have a chat about the game. So we've seen obviously improvements visually. I sat down on the game and played Monte Carlo. I thought, first rally in the game, let's try it out, see how we get on. Like the look of it, let's try it out. And I think first impressions were, it's very much more like the simulator. It's leaning, it certainly is simulation from what they've described. I've had very limited time on the game. Didn't have time to complete one stage on Monte Carlo, so I drove it at first, span out, learned a bit of the handling, drove it again, span out again, and then drove it a third time, and then span out, and that was the end of my go on Monte Carlo. So I wasn't able to complete the stage. It was very tricky in terms of handling, but it was tricky in terms of weight distribution, and it was a learning experience. I noticed people around me everywhere crashing off everywhere. It was more like getting onto iRacing rather than getting onto a console racing game. Experienced drivers will take a few moments to get the nuance to handling, and you'll see in the final GoPro clip. Unfortunately, the GoPro was slightly too zoomed in, but you get the idea. I was getting to grips with the handling at that stage. It should be pointed out, I couldn't hear the audio very well in the room, so I couldn't hear my co-driver at all. I was just using the cymbals, and I couldn't hear my engine very well at all. So, it wasn't like playing at home. It was a very sort of noisy environment. So you can't really get the real feel for the game. But certainly, I think in terms of handling, I could see straight away they've gone for that much more, realistic style, and that bodes really well. After that, I recorded some visuals, if you like, on Finland. Finland was very narrow. Really tricky to drive, but it wasn't really pushing, so I don't know how well the car would drift through the corners, and that's something I'm going to investigate a lot later. But certainly first impressions, very narrow, based on the real stages, should be excellent for the fans. And then I played a little bit of Wales as well, but I didn't know where the handbrake was on the controller. I tried a few different buttons, hit the rewind button, everything else, realised I don't have time to figure out the buttons. Let's just get some gameplay. So ultimately, very little gameplay came out of it in terms of the gameplay session. It was just, for me, it was merely 15 minutes on the game, not really enough to form an opinion. But let's look at what we've got. Visually, I think it looks really nice at this stage. Runs at 30 frames per second on console. I look forward to seeing how it looks when it's running at 60 frames on the PC. That's something obviously I'll be checking out when the game turns up. And obviously we'll have comparisons with other rally games as well. I know a lot of you say to me, how does it compare? Well, I always say, if you have Richard Burns and Dirt Rally at one end of the spectrum, then it depends, you've got arcade games at the other end, and it depends where they position themselves. WRC5 was positioned more sort of in the middle. They had simulation elements in there, and they try to find a nice balance of handling, because a lot of people can't drive a rally car. So they need that extra support. They need a game that's not too hard. But then, of course, some of the stages didn't look like the countries at all, and there was no people, no crowds. Just doesn't capture the atmosphere. Certainly in the clips I saw on Sebastien Loeb, the Sebastien Loeb's input has helped a lot in terms of handling. Radical improvement in the handling since Gamescom. Lots more detail in terms of people and crowd and everything else. It really has come along a lot visually, but also in terms of handling massively. Onto the audio, and again, improvements made in audio. It's still not quite there yet in terms of, it's not the top racing title in terms of audio, but it's certainly improved on what Milestone have had in the past. The video you're going to see in the next few days, a comparison is from the bonnet cam. I actually find is not as good as in-car. There's much better sound in-car. In fact, I think that's common with a lot of racing games. They have a good in-car sound, and that's predominantly because you get the rolling of the wheels in-car. And this is sort of constant rumble of the wheels, and you don't hear the wheels as well outside the car. So I think that's something which there'll need to be some work in terms of developing the actual car audio. But one note I thought was impressive was the co-driver. Very natural, not very robotic. It wasn't sort of predetermined lines. It felt like they were flowing, and he was in the car with you, bouncing around. It was a bit more realistic on what we were seeing. So certainly a little bit muffled at times, but overall the descriptions were good, and they were working well with the corners I was getting, and the notes were good as well. And that was something when I first started, say, on Dirt Rally, I struggled with the co-driver, struggled with the feeling of speed into corners, especially hairpins. I didn't have that problem here. I found it was pretty good. What I found the challenge was, just how to control the cars in different situations, and how the weight affected the car. And every car's so different in terms of its weight balance, its grip, and its audio note as well in terms of changing gear. So audio's been improved. You've got 300 kilometers, they say, of rally track. I don't know how that compares to other rally games, but certainly it seems to be a lot, and there was a lot in there to sort of learn to drive, and there was a lot of different modes and stuff we haven't explored yet as well. And I hope that they bring that together in terms of the online modes, and really sort of building a nice sort of polished product. We're 2 months away from launch now. There are bugs in there. They are working to get rid of those bugs, and I hope they can get all of them sorted by launch. It's always the way it is with games at this stage. They bring it all together, and then they start the fixing process, and you just hope they've given themselves enough time between now and launch. But they are determined to get everything fixed, they assure me. They're aware of issues that there were with Ride and everything else last year, and they don't want that to happen again. This is a Sebastien Loeb game. It's an important title for them, and certainly in terms of investment across the title, it looks very good. A couple of things I think that don't look as good on it so far. For me personally, the outside car view. I was looking at the car, drove the game, got up, looked at someone playing with the outside car view, and it looked a bit solid, looked like a box on wheels in a way. And I looked at the Pikes Peak trailer, and if there's one thing about the trailer, besides the lighting looking not great on that trailer, was the replay cameras. Not only did the replay cameras look poor, but the animation of the car looks poor. And what I realised just looking at it was it doesn't seem to convey the actual physics that you're playing. So you've got this sort of detailed physics model, but then you've got a not as detailed animation on the car in terms of how it's turning. And sometimes, you say perhaps it would do better with sort of hyper realism, where the car would lean extra amounts in terms of the visual that's not connected directly to the actual physical physics, because games have to be a lot more visual and simulations a lot more visual in certain ways than the real life counterpart, simply because you're not feeling the car under you. So you need visual tweaks which help you determine grip and car movement and suspension and weight transfer and everything else. So that's the word I was looking for earlier, with the weight transfer and steering. So certainly you need to make your decisions early before you get to the corner. You can't get to a corner in it and then decide, I'm going to go this way. You've got to position the car accordingly. Otherwise, you are just going to fly off. So I think in terms of simulation, certainly what I played at Monte Carlo was certainly leaning that way, and I found it impressive. I found it fun to play, and I look forward to playing it a bit more. But as I was saying, the simulation visually with the cars just doesn't look as good in the replays as actually in game. And a lot of people judge a game. They say, "Oh, physics are rubbish," because I've seen a replay of a car going around a corner. I mean, it's just nonsense, really. You can never really know what a game handles and plays like until you get your hands on it. I mean, for me, that was kind of where it went downhill with Forza Motorsport 6 for me this year. I thought it looked amazing. I played it, didn't really enjoy it, didn't like the direction they'd taken. So, and the review for Forza 6 is on the site. Do check that out as well. So that's it really. I think so far so good. It's all coming together nicely. We've got some comparisons coming up on the channel. You're going to see a comparison with Milestone's own developed WRC3, Monte Carlo, and of course the Monte Carlo Rally stage I was playing. We're also going to be showing a Drive Club comparison as well, which I think is very interesting. Drive Club graphically, in terms of the environments, is the leader in terms of sort of environments and visuals and everything else, and pushing all the technology on the PS4. It's an interesting comparison there. And of course a comparison with WRC5, released recently, running on the PS4, Monte Carlo Rally. Direct comparison. Good to see the different direction they've all taken there. And and then we're going to see in the previews and the upcoming builds, I'm going to be playing it a lot in the coming weeks. I'll be giving a lot of your feedback back to Milestone. I've got some feedback as well. I mean, certainly for me, those just little tweaks, really. It's all sort of coming together. It's come such a long way since the Gamescom build, which was quite disappointing. I remember seeing it at the time and thinking, it's not ready. And when they delayed the game, I thought, great. They need that extra few months of development, because that's what Milestone needed to do with Ride, really. Just delay it a few months. It'll be a better game. And they've done it this time with the Sebastien Loeb. But a word I think should be mentioned on the 60 frames per second debate. I mean, it keeps on rolling on. I'm a 60 frames per second fan, and I would prefer, in many respects, cut down graphics to keep a frame rate. But the fact is, the general public, there's a lot of people who can't see the difference between 60 frames and 30 frames, and they see a 60 frames game and they say it looks rubbish. I mean, I think Project Cars went all through all that with with Drive Club this year, and you think to yourself, well, it's hard for developers to make 60 frames on the current consoles. The current consoles are disappointing. We were expecting them to be a fair bit more powerful than they actually are, and they're almost sort of reaching their limits already. Now in the next sort of 2 years, they'll be sort of completely maxed out. And the general public just don't see that, So I think with 30 frames per second, at least you can max out all the visuals and everything else, all the, shaders and effects and everything that you can do. You just can't do it at 60 frames. But it was highlighted to me recently in terms of where different companies are, And, it's like on the Xbox, you're always going to have first-party support. It's always going to be for, Forza Motorsport. It's a first-party title. It will get more support graphically than, say, Project Cars would. But then Codemasters co-developed their engine with Sony. Project Cars and SMS were supported in some ways by EA. I don't know the financial situation there in developing it all, but ultimately it's very expensive making great visuals, and I think that where Milestone have come from in developing their own graphics engine from the ground up and building on that every year is certainly good progress, and I really look forward to seeing where it goes in the future. But at least we have real rally stages. Some of these stages are going to be quite long, and if you look at the San Remo clip I was showing, and I'll show it now while I'm talking, it's a very, very narrow stage. It's very, very narrow. I mean, how the drivers do it, I do not know. And it's going to be one of those stages that, I'm glad they've put in the game, but, a large percentage of the general public are just not going to be able to play it, because it's going to be pinball. They're going to be bouncing from wall to wall to wall. It's really a stage that requires perfection, and it's great that they've included it in this, It's the first time we've had a rally that narrow in a home game like this, and it's going to be a real tough one for people, but great to see. I mean, I look forward to seeing YouTube videos of people absolutely perfect at it and flying around. A word should also go to the input from the steering wheel. Obviously, I used a wheel on my experience, and it handled very well indeed, so I was certainly very impressed with the handling. I can't say I necessarily noticed the force feedback. I was so sort of enveloped in terms of, I almost completely ignored the force feedback and was completely focused on just keeping the car on the road for the most part. But I will say that the feedback I was feeling seemed okay. There was some interesting wheel weight there. I felt when I lost the car, why I lost the car, and again, it was the weight transfer in there. But there's always room for improvements and tweaks and everything else, and I can't really say in any detail until I've had like a few hours on the game, running it on different surfaces and going from there. But I hope I've answered some of your questions in the comments throughout this video, and if you have any questions about the game, do let me know, and I'll see if I can't answer them. I'll see if I can get some answers from Milestone. If not, once we do sort of the first look of the final game in the new year, we'll put it through its paces and really see what you can get out of it and how enjoyable it is. I do look forward to seeing it running on the PC. I think seeing it running at 60 frames on the PC, if my PC can manage it, will be very impressive indeed, and I look forward to trying that out. But that's it from me for now on this preview. I hope you've enjoyed all the preview coverage so far. Comparison videos to come on the channel, and there'll be more from me very soon.